Good evening and welcome to Writers Unplugged. This is a series that will air throughout the year in support of Cleveland Reads. Writers Unplugged is a chance to hear your favorite or your new to you writers in conversation as if you were eavesdropping on them in a coffee shop. Cleveland Reads is an initiative that was in response to the low literacy levels in our community, and Mayor Bibb has challenged Clevelanders to read 1 million books and or 1 million minutes this year. For more information, visit clevelandreads.com. My name is Jen Jumba. I'm a librarian at Cleveland Public Library, and one of the very best parts of my job is talking to the people who write the books I read. And I know it sounds like a cliche to be a librarian who loves to read, but I find it truly special to get to know their writer, not just their craft, but to know them as a person. And I'm sure you will be just as charmed as I am and excited to read Wanda's books. So I'm excited this evening with a talented writer, a gem of a human being, and a Cleveland hometown star, Wanda Morris. Fangirl in check, right? So before we get started, I wanted to mention a few housekeeping things. First of all, to figure out who else is coming to join us for Writers Unplugged, go to clevelandreads.com and click on events. And Max Backs Books on Coventry, which Wanda knows, is our wonderful independent local bookstore. And they have ordered copies of Wanda's books extra because there is a chance for you to go and buy them at the end of this broadcast. And then in the chat, take a moment, let us know where you're watching from. If you have questions, I've been told that this is one of the favorite things that writers get to do is answer questions from their readers. So I'm going to take a moment to introduce Wanda. She is originally from Cleveland. Her debut novel, All Her Little Secrets, has won numerous awards, such as one of the best books of 2021 by Hudson Booksellers, selected as the #1 top pick for library reads by librarians across the country, which is high praise because we tend to read a lot of books, right? Mm-hmm. And it was selected as a Book Buzz pick by Good Morning America and won the 2022 Lefty Award for the best debut mystery novel. And this is the moment for all writers, right? And with a debut novel, All Her Little Secrets has been optioned for a limited series on Showtime, executive produced and starring Emmy Award-winning actress Uzo Aduba. You probably know her from Orange is the New Black. So rock star. But this is no sophomore slump, my friends. Wanda and her latest book, Anywhere You Run, was named one of the top 10 crime books for 2022 by the New York Times, selected as one of the best books of 2022 by NPR, Publishers Weekly, and Library Journal. It's been named as one of the 15 standout historical fiction books to read this year by Oprah Daily. Oprah. But wait, there's more. And I get goosebumps reading this. Booklist stated that this riveting and moving novel with echoes of Zora Neale Hurston's Their Eyes Were Watching God is a highly recommended for fans of suspense and women's fiction. You will see and hear that Wanda is an incredible talent, but I've come to know her as a remarkable human being whose kindness and enthusiasm for reading is infectious. And after listening to our conversation this evening, I think you'll see the same thing. So if you can all join me in a warm welcome for Wanda Morris.
Oh, thank you for that wonderful introduction, Jen. That was very nice.
You're quite welcome. We have people, Julie says that I have the best job ever. I agree. Poppy G is joining us. She is Australian and also writes mysteries. So she is excited to be here. Absolutely.
Hi, everyone.
Yeah, so we're going to go ahead and get started. And can you tell us a little bit about your new book, Anywhere You Run, kind of the story in your own words?
Sure. So, Anywhere You Run, I like to describe it as a coming of age story of two young sisters with a few dead bodies thrown in there. It is the story of Marigold and Violet Richards. And they're 21, 22 years old. Violet is brutally attacked, and they live in Jackson, Mississippi in 1964. So we're talking the Jim Crow South. And when she's brutally attacked, she kills her attacker. But she knows as a Black woman in the Jim Crow South, she won't get justice. So she takes off running. And through a series of twists and turns, she winds up in a small town in Georgia. Her sister, Marigold, back home, finds herself in a bit of trouble as well because she is pregnant and unmarried, which is a big no-no for good girls in the 1960s. When the police show up at her door looking for Violet, she figures, ooh, I might be in trouble too. So she takes off running, thinking that fleeing will give her an opportunity to cover up her unplanned pregnancy
Mhm.
and get out from under the police eye. What the two women don't realize, however,
Mhm.
is that there is a man, also from Jackson, who knows about the murder and knows what happened. And before the police can finger Violet, he
Mhm.
takes off running after the two women. And he has a very
Mhm.
unusual and sinister motive for finding the women.
Wow.
Yeah, it deals with issues of course, sisterly bond and love, but it also
Mhm.
deals with women's issues around governing a woman's body, her
Mhm.
own body, financial independence, voting rights for Blacks in the 1960s.
Right.
Um, so a whole host of issues are wrapped up in the themes of this book.
Absolutely. How do you, when you're writing, how do you get to know your characters?
That's a great question. You know, usually my characters come to me kind of like in a vibe. Like I love writing about women, and women
Okay.
are so complicated and complex. And so usually I am trying to find a character who will give me the conduit, like a vessel, in
Okay.
order to explore some issues around being a woman in America.
Absolutely. That struck me with your first book too, that you
Mhm.
enjoy writing about women. And I want everybody to hear that, yes, we as women are complex.
Yeah,
We are
yeah,
complicated
let's own it.
and we're not
That's
apologizing for it, right?
right, own it. Mhm,
Absolutely. So I'm talking with Wanda Morris, whose latest book is Anywhere You Run. So it takes place in 1964, as you said, in the South,
mhm,
which, as we know in our nation's history, is an incredibly dark time for us.
mhm,
So, can
mhm.
you talk about why you chose to set the story then?
I came up with the premise for this book back in 2020 and early 2021. We had
Okay.
just gone through the 2020 election,
Okay.
and there was all this noise and rancor about, the big lie and fraudulent voting.
Hmm.
And I I kept thinking to myself, how did we get here?
Hmm.
Um, because the country has become so polarized. I walked into the library and just thought I'd do a bit of research around voting rights,
Okay.
particularly voting rights for Blacks in this country, and learned that the Voting Rights Act of 1965 got underway long before 1965. There were a lot of people who bled and died in order to get the right to vote. And now we were living in a country where that was being suppressed. So I thought it would be really interesting to write about that topic, but I couldn't
Absolutely.
really figure out a contemporary angle to do the story.
Okay.
And so I went back to the research and decided to explore these themes right there in the
Yeah.
setting in which all that history occurred.
Yeah. I think it makes perfect sense. I think oftentimes to understand where we are now, we have
Mhm.
to kind of look back about where we've been, right? To see if we can figure out how we got here so that we move forward and don't end up backwards, right?
Mhm.
So there's a lot
Exactly.
of wisdom in what you wrote about and the choices, and realize how a lot of us take things for granted that other
Mhm.
people work so hard for. So,
Absolutely, absolutely. Same with some of the issues around women's rights
mhm,
that are handled in the book. You know, it's interesting because when I wrote this book and I turned it in to my publisher,
mhm.
Roe v. Wade had not been overturned.
Oh, wow.
And now that the book has been published, the things that occurred and the ways that a woman no longer has the right to govern her own body, as depicted in 1964, is very much real
Yeah.
now in 2023 in some states. Yeah, it's almost like we're going backwards in some ways.
Yeah, it's hard to not feel that way.
Yeah.
Absolutely, and I think that's the thing I was struck by in both of your books, is that you tackle these issues that are complex, that you do it with a grit and at the same time with a sensitivity, which to be able to straddle that duality, I think is a, testament to your ability to do incredible storytelling.
Thank you.
Um and anytime you can take an issue and put a human face on it and put a character to it, I think it makes it far easier to discuss, right? Because we're not attacking one another. We're having a discussion about a character in a book, and hopefully those are the discussions. And I don't know if this was your intention, but these are the meaningful discussions about a character that we have these tough conversations so that we can have positive change and impact.
Absolutely. I mean, you hit the nail right on the head. That's what I sought to do with my first book,
Yeah.
as well as this book, in All Her Little Secrets, my debut. I wanted to open up the conversation about what it was like to work in corporate America as a
Mhm.
female, and in particular, a Black female,
Mhm.
and all those things that we as women go through, the microaggressions, the gaslighting, um, any host of issues. And
Absolutely.
without necessarily finger pointing, but saying, real is real, and this is what we deal with. Even in 2021 when the book came out.
Absolutely. I think the thing that strikes me is that it's a universal theme, and people talk about people who read, and especially fiction, that people who read tend to be more empathetic. And I think it's because of
Mhm.
books like yours that allow us to see things from another perspective so that
Mm,
we can act better, do better, be better as
right,
human beings.
right.
So,
Exactly. Have those conversations. They're tough,
mhm,
but if we can start them around, like you said, a character in a book, um,
mhm.
we just might find ourselves on more common ground than uncommon.
Yeah, and so I'm reading this and I'm finding that the more you talk about these issues, to your point, we have more in common than we don't,
Right. Hmm.
right? And I don't know how that got lost along the way.
You know what? I wondered that very same thing. It was kind of the genesis of the second book, is how did we get here? How did we get to a
Mhm,
place where the truth is no longer the truth and a lie isn't a lie? Um, and you know, what's more, I don't want to necessarily say painful, but I think what's more challenging is, how do we get from here? How do we come back together? Um, in civility,
mhm,
and in the common purpose to make this
absolutely.
country a more perfect union, as
Absolutely.
the Constitution says. Yeah.
I agree. Can you talk a little bit about your background before you became a writer?
Yeah, so as
Yeah.
you mentioned, I was born and raised in Cleveland,
Yeah.
Ohio. I'm from the East Side, right off of 93rd and Harvard, as a matter of
Awesome.
fact. And I went to Case Western Reserve
Mhm,
University, graduated there with an accounting degree, and then also attended Case Western's law school. So
mhm.
I am, like, seriously a native Clevelander,
Yes.
through and through.
Yeah.
Um, but after law school, I moved here to Atlanta, where I currently write from. and I have practiced corporate law for the bulk of my career. Um, Interestingly enough, I started writing All Her Little Secrets while I was still practicing as a lawyer. And would just, I wrote the book in secret. My own husband didn't know that I was writing a
Oh,
book.
no way.
Husband did not know. Um, I didn't tell my extended family
Mhm.
until the buy link went live the April before the book came
Well,
out.
not even when you got like the letter that says you have a deal, not even the final edits, not even an arc.
I did not.
Wow.
I did not, and that's because I was so concerned whether this would really take off. But yeah, I wrote at night. Usually I was kind of fried, so I didn't get much done at night. But I would get up early in the morning some days, right before I had to get my kids off to school.
Yeah.
I would write during the day. I would
Mhm.
use my lunch break and I'd leave work and go around the corner to the library.
Yay.
Um, so shout out to the Vinings Library here as part of the Cobb County Library System.
Yeah.
I would go over to the Vinings Library,
Okay.
every day, and I'd write for an hour, hour and a half,
Okay.
and what came out of it was All Her Little Secrets.
Well, it's
Mhm.
funny that you used the word secret in that title and you kept the secret from your family and just
I know,
yeah.
right?
I
That
guess
was
the
my
reason
little
I
secret.
yeah, I guess the reason I bring up your background is speaking to, how we got here, right? And how we move
Mhm,
forward that seeing the work that you've done, in law, you
mhm.
know, seeing things done, undone. Um, I guess that's the thing that has to make you, I don't know, stay up at night that
Um, yeah, but you know what? I still have hope that
yes.
we can be better. I really do, and I think that that is probably why I'm also like an advocate for issues around women, and women's rights. I started a program, uh, several years ago
Okay.
when I was serving as the president of the Association of Corporate Counsel and started a women's initiative
Yeah.
so that I could help empower women, that worked in corporate America, particularly lawyers that worked in corporate legal departments. I have to hope, and I keep hope that, we can be better than what we are.
Right.
And I think it's why I write about the issues that I write about. I write about things that are important to me,
Yeah.
and the issues that, make me sad and make me
Mhm.
mad and make me
Absolutely.
crazy.
And I
Mhm,
think that speaks to like how you're making a difference in the future, right? So how we
mhm,
move from here to there, if you're advocating, and even if it's I mean, you're obviously president of a large group and starting a women's initiative, but if we all were to do that, right, to find whatever cause it is that we want to change and be part of a group to advocate for that and raise awareness and
right.
yeah. So you were part of the solution. You don't just write the book, to follow through with actions, and that's inspiring. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so
So
much.
I'm talking to Wanda Morris, author of Anywhere You Run, and I have to say that I appreciated in this is your latest book, Anywhere You Run, that you had a warning about the language in the book.
Mhm.
Um, I think it was important that you do that. Do you have you had feedback about the fact that you put I'm going to say a trigger warning, but just letting people know what was coming to be authentic to that time?
So I'll tell you how that came about.
Okay.
Yeah, this is my first foray into historical. And of course, I would pick like one of the most problematic times in this country's history,
Mhm.
to write historical. But I have always believed, because I read, historical genre, when I read a book that's historically based, I think that the author almost owes a responsibility to be, authentic to the time period in which
Absolutely.
they're writing. And so as writing the book, I thought to myself, this could be problematic because, for one, I don't use the kind of terms
Mm-mm.
I wrote into the book. I don't advocate for people that use those terms.
Mm-mm.
But I found myself, struggling trying to figure out, okay, if I don't use this term here, one, am I being really authentic to the story that I'm
Mhm.
telling? And two, does the story even ring true? So I wrote the story with the epithets in there, and
Mhm.
I turned the book in to my editor, and she was like, "Oh no, we you've got to take these out." And I said, that's tough. And I said, let me think about it.
Mhm.
And I took the manuscript back and I thought about it and I thought about it. And Jen, I just could not
Yeah.
remove some of them because I just didn't think that the story would ring true. It would ring hollow to say that this was 1964, Deep South,
Mhm.
Mississippi, one of the staunchest segregationist states in the entire Union,
Mhm.
and no one ever used those epithets. It just rang hollow. So I talked to my editor and I said, I'll strike a compromise.
Okay.
Um, I'll take some of them out, but we'll include an author's note.
Okay.
And I will replace the ones that I take out with something else. But you know what was so interesting
Mm.
is that I took some out and then I went back to look for other epithets or other terms I could use. And they were just as bad or worse than the ones that I took out. It was just all around bad.
Mhm.
But my editor came to understand, yeah, I can understand that if we, tell people up front what you get is what you're going to get, and you
Mhm.
understand that, and understand that the places where they're used, it's not like rampant through the book, but
It
the
is
few
not, no.
places where it's used, the impact of those scenes, you really, really feel it.
Oh,
Um,
I felt it right here. I think I will speak to the fact that, looking at your intention for why you used it is
mhm,
important. The second thing is I felt after reading it, like I've never uttered those words. And then
mhm,
after reading them, I needed to like wash my eyes out with soap. You know how like when you were a kid and you would say bad things? Not you
mhm.
probably, but me. I for sure I did. And your mom would wash your mouth out with soap. What after reading that, I was like, the impact that it had was jarring.
Yeah, and that was intentional because
Okay.
here's the thing, Jen, words matter.
Absolutely.
Words matter, and we
Mhm.
learned that too, um, throughout the previous presidency and
Mhm.
administration. Words really matter, and
Absolutely.
so when you call someone an epithet or, something just inhumane like that, the
Mhm.
intention behind that is to make the person feel less than.
Right.
And that's why those terms were used back then, because the intention was always to make people feel less than human, less than what they really were. And if you can get into someone's mind and
Right.
you can make them feel a certain way about themselves, half the job is done because
Mhm.
they'll take care of the rest of it. If I feel like I'm inferior or I'm incompetent, then I'll start to behave that way, right?
Yeah. What is it like? Your thoughts become words, your words become
Exactly,
action, your action becomes behavior type of,
exactly,
yeah, it's a domino effect. Yeah.
exactly, and so that's why those terms were used. That's why I hate to hear those terms now
Yeah.
when they're used, even when they're used amongst Blacks.
Okay.
They're horrible, horrible words.
Mhm.
But to my point,
Mhm.
it was to demonstrate the horror of the Jim Crow South in
Yeah.
1964 Mississippi.
And it wasn't really that long ago. If you
It's
that's the
not.
thing that's jarring. This isn't something
Right,
that took place like a couple hundred years ago. I mean, this
right,
isn't that long ago.
right,
Um,
right. People
so
are still walking around and living their best lives that were still living when this was happening. Yeah,
yeah, absolutely. Um,
incredible.
yeah, I'm gonna give a shout out to Joe. He's watching from Brooklyn, Ohio. Julie has a question for you, and she
Mhm.
wants to know, how different was it writing your second book on deadline, and how did you get used to that? If your first one was
Oh,
written in secret.
hey, Julie. That's a great question. I think with the first book, because one, I didn't know what the heck I was doing when I was writing the first book. So it took like years.
If only I could do something where I didn't know what I was doing and it would turn out that good.
But, I had this, long runway
Yeah.
to write that book, and
Okay.
so I did it, and, I kept revising it and revising it and getting
Mhm.
rejection and revising it and getting more rejection, and so I think I was learning how to write a book,
Okay.
and I had the leisure of doing that. Then when it was time to write the second book, I still came back to the computer and I was kinda like, "Uh-oh." But at least with the second book, I kinda had a leg up because by the second book, I kinda knew what characterization was, and I knew how to do pacing and,
Mhm.
develop the characters, and so I kinda knew how to do that. My biggest hurdle was finding the right, vehicle, through the
Mhm.
characters to write about the themes that I wanted
Okay.
to write about, and that's what, um, is always difficult for me, is making sure that the characters are spot on so that the themes resonate in the story. Um, it's the same way I'm working on my 3rd book now, and I still feel that way, like, "Oh gosh, I've got this deadline, am I, making this the right way?" Because I like books that, teach me something, but I
Okay.
also like those books to be engaging and entertaining, and so
Mhm.
that's what I try to do, in my books. So, it wasn't as difficult as writing the first book, but I still have those moments like, "Uh-oh,
Yeah.
what are we doing?"
Yeah. I'm talking with Wanda Morris. Latest book is Anywhere You Run. So it's the story of two sisters, right, who are both escaping, both for very different reasons, each living with that threat of being found,
Yeah.
and that tension that exists. So, can you talk a little bit about your writing process? I mean, do you know how the story's going to end before you
Mm.
start? Okay.
No,
No.
no. I am what they call
Yeah. This
a
is Mike's
plotter.
favorite word. Yeah.
Yeah. There's this whole concept of
Yeah.
plotters versus pantsers, and so a plotter is someone who,
Yeah.
kind of outlines the story and
Mhm.
kinda knows what scenes are going to be in it. A pantser is somebody who just, like, goes to the computer, puts their fingers on the keyboard, and starts writing away, no outline, nothing like that. So I do start out with, like, a rough outline. It's
Okay.
nothing really detailed, but I have a sense of what the important scenes will be, like the
Okay.
scenes that will turn the story or some interesting twist. I never know how the book will end. Um, and I think that's what drives me and makes me a little nervous because I'm like, "Oh, I gotta figure this out. I gotta figure this out."
Okay.
And hopefully I'm writing the book in a way that there can be several potential, you know, villains or
Yeah.
several different ways the book can end, and then I need to figure out what is the best way that's going to be most impactful, most engaging, most
Right.
entertaining. Um, but I start my just to talk about writing process itself, I always
Yeah.
start my first drafts, by longhand. I write them in longhand,
Yes.
because I go to the computer and it's like a blank screen and my mind is blank as well. But something about writing it out, maybe it leaves my brain and goes down my arm and through
Yeah.
my fingers, and it kinda comes out that way. And then once I get, a sizable, amount together,
Mhm.
then I put that into the computer, and I'm editing as I am
Okay.
inputting it to the computer, and, it's from there that I now have a draft that I can
Yeah.
start to revise and work on and kinda massage the characters and the scenes.
Yeah. I relate to you in terms of writing longhand. Before I became a librarian, I worked in radio. And so I used to
Mm,
write commercials, and all my commercials were written longhand. And I think it was what you spoke to about that white screen panic. And
mm,
also it allowed my brain to slow down because it's really easy to type, type,
right.
type, type. So this forced me to kind of slow it down, kind of get it.
Mhm.
And then I would go and type it and kind of edit a little bit as I was going. So,
Yeah.
but I mean, we're talking, 120 words for 60-second spot versus, like two amazing books. So, a little bit different.
Yeah,
So,
but yeah, the process is still pretty
and
much.
I think it probably speaks to the fact that you're a pantser because there's so much tension on each page that I just am like, I have to figure out what happens. I mean, I binged this book. I couldn't stop. And I was
Thank
like, well, just
you.
one more chapter, one more chapter. And then I would be like, wait a second. And then you would switch to a different character's point of view. And I was like, well, I have to read this because I have to read this to figure out what happened with that one. So how do you do that? Like balancing multiple points of view and telling the story from their perspective.
Well, you know what? For me, what I did is I put the just for people who haven't read the book,
Yeah, no
Anywhere
spoilers.
You Run
Yeah.
has, 3 points of view.
Hmm.
So, they're the 2 sisters, and then there's the point of view, from the man who is chasing the 2 sisters across the country.
Hmm.
And what I did with each of those characters, if you read the book, you'll realize each of them has a secret.
Hmm.
All 3 of them, including the man who's chasing them. So each of them has a secret. And if their secret is revealed, then it could be really disastrous for them.
Absolutely.
And each of them has a secret that's connected to the others. So
Oh, what a
by
tangled web
doing
we weave.
that, right?
Yeah.
But by doing that,
Yeah.
then each one they has some stake in the story. And
Absolutely.
so when I cover, for example, Violet, when she runs away to Georgia,
Hmm.
she's trying to keep her secret, but
Yes.
she's also in the midst of, this oppressive environment
Right.
where at any moment, not only could her secret be revealed, but she could just suffer because she's a Black woman in the South.
Right.
And so I'm hoping that the reader engages with her and kind of feels that way as well. And the same for
Yeah.
the other characters, because Mercer, who
Mhm.
is a white man um, in the South, in the Jim Crow South,
Mhm.
also is a pawn in this
Right.
segregationist society. And so now he is placed in a really precarious position too, as well. And
Okay.
so the reader starts to feel, wait a minute, what is going on? One of the best compliments I got was when my husband read the book. He said, I gotta tell you, I have mixed emotions about Mercer. Mercer is the man who's
Yes.
chasing the women. And
Yes.
he's like, you know what? Wait a minute. I thought to myself, I would not feel for him, but I do. And that's a really that to me is a compliment
Mhm.
because I wanted that character to be sympathetic as well as the
Mhm.
2 women because he too has become a pawn and is
Absolutely.
played by the segregation in the South.
Absolutely. I think this speaks to Poppy's question. She discovered you through the Backroom Authors with Hank, Philippi Ryan, and Karen
Oh,
Dione.
yes.
Yes.
Yes. Hey, Poppy.
Yeah. And so we just answered her question about the writing process, but her next question is about villains and whether or not they were hard to write. Some authors
Mhm.
like writing villains, but she says your villains are so real. What are
Mm.
your thoughts on that? And I think that just speaks to, you know,
You know what? That is an interesting question.
mhm,
I have some villains that I like to write.
mhm,
I I actually enjoy writing Mercer.
mhm,
In my first book, I did not enjoy writing Willie J. Groover.
mm-mm.
Um,
I did not
that
like him.
that one was very, very tough for
Yeah.
me but very, very necessary to the
Mhm.
story.
Right.
But I generally like all my characters because I try to give each one of them some redeeming quality.
Yeah.
Willie J. Groover might have been the exception
Yeah,
to
he
that
is the
rule.
exception to that rule for sure.
He might have been the exception to that. But I generally, if
Mhm,
you look at my characters,
mhm,
the good characters aren't all good, and they have some issues,
mhm,
and the bad characters aren't all bad. They actually have some redeeming qualities, and I think that's because that's how real people are.
mhm,
We're not all good and we're not all bad. We're
mhm.
a mix of both. And so I generally just like writing characters, even the bad
Yeah,
ones.
absolutely. Absolutely. I'm joined here by Wanda Morris, author of Anywhere You Run. And I think it speaks to what writing does that other mediums might not, is it allows you to see inside their head to figure out what motivates them. Is it, any means to an end, knowing what their end goal is and doing kind of anything necessary to reach that goal, is something that books allow you that glimpse into, that complicated part where we're good people, but we might not make the best choices for the right reason, and vice versa, right?
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. I mean, you look at somebody like Mercer's character and the
Mhm.
choices that he has to make, and you think, ooh,
Yeah.
what I do in that situation. And that's what I like when I read a book. It makes me think, "Ooh, how would I react?" And interestingly enough, that's one of the reasons why I started writing, thrillers,
Okay.
because I love the genre, but I didn't see, female protagonists that
Mhm.
look like me. Um, and I remember reading a book, I won't tell the name of the book or the author, but I remember closing that book after I finished it and
Mhm.
thinking, I I would not have made those choices, right?
Mhm.
Like,
Right.
I don't think that that's how a woman would react in that situation,
Okay.
and, I thought, why can't I find somebody that looks like me who is,
Mhm.
strong and capable and smart and, rides
Absolutely.
around in, fast cars and chasing bad guys.
Yeah.
She's gotta be out there, in a book for me, and so that's what launched me into writing my own
No,
books.
that's absolutely fabulous, because I think it's so important, especially as a librarian, is wanting to connect people with the right book, and how important it is
Mhm.
for people to see themselves in books.
Right.
And now I think is like the pinnacle time of writing, because we're getting to see so many different perspectives. It's not just, you know, the older, white male who's the detective
Right.
in the noir series type of thing, that there's all
Mhm.
different kinds, and it resonates, right? That human experience with all of
Absolutely.
us. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. I love that so much. I think it is such a refreshing time to,
Mhm.
be a writer as well as a reader because you can find so many different types of books. There's something for everybody out there now.
Absolutely. Um, can you talk a little bit about your research? I'm sure during the course of doing your research about this time period in history, was there anything that you came across that was super interesting that didn't make the book that you wish would
Mm,
have?
that didn't make the book. Um, you know what? I wished, that I could have spent more time in the book talking about, the stories of, Black people who attempted to register to vote.
Okay.
Um, just to back up for a minute, when I decided on this topic, I went to, the, Research Library on African American History and Culture, which is located right here in Atlanta.
Okay.
They're part of the, Fulton County Public
Mhm.
Library System. And they're a research library, so they're a treasure trove of books and papers and all sorts of materials for research. And so it was so funny. I walked up to the librarian there and I told him what I was writing about. And I said, I need to know
Mhm.
what I don't know. And he's like, I got you.
Mhm.
And he opened up, like I said, this treasure trove of information. And as part and parcel of that, I reviewed a lot of firsthand accounts of Black people who actually went to the circuit clerks in counties in Mississippi
Mhm.
and asked for applications to vote, and the things that they were told and the reasons why they were not given applications to vote would just break your heart.
Yeah.
And so I alluded to a couple
You
of
did,
them.
and it broke my heart.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I did allude to a couple of them, but because the book is a thriller and it has to be
Yes.
pacey, I couldn't spend a lot of time on that. But I really wished I could have spent more time around that particular topic, because I think it would give people a fuller appreciation of how precious the right to vote really is. And that
Absolutely.
you and I, we go into the Department of Motor Vehicles and check
Mhm.
off a box and say, yeah, register me to vote, and it's
Right.
done. Whereas people were walking miles and miles to get to the application office, first of all,
Mhm.
and then to be told, I can only give you an application if you pass an IQ test. And
Yeah.
the
What
IQ test is, tell me how many bubbles are generated from a bar of soap. Like, are
Yeah.
you kidding me?
Inane. Yeah.
Yeah, and so the right to vote is so very precious, and I think perhaps now people understand that when you see current efforts to suppress the vote.
Right.
Um, so yeah, that I think if I had had more, leisurely time on the
Mhm.
page, I would have loved to have spent more time around, some of that research on that topic.
Well, maybe there's another book in you that kinda highlights that, or a blog or an essay.
Maybe.
Oh, she's grinning. Okay. All right. I won't say any more. Can I ask you, Wanda Morris, right?
Mhm.
What is it like to be compared to Zora Neale Hurston? I mean, I have goosebumps saying that. I can't imagine how you feel.
Ay, 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 ay. I saw that, when that start review came out,
Mhm.
and first of all, I started crying because 'cause I'm a big crybaby, um, but, I I really have no words. I am blessed. I
Mhm.
am truly, truly blessed that I get to do this thing that I love so much, but you know, when somebody says something like that, I am just, I mean, Zora Neale Hurston
Mhm.
is a writing icon,
Yeah.
and I stand nowhere near her.
Mm.
But the fact that somebody reads my work and feels something so deep and so moving, that they could compare it like that is just it blows my mind, first of all, and it makes me appreciate so very much more this gift that I get to share with the world.
Absolutely, and I think it comes across that you're somebody who loves what you do, and every word is thoughtfully constructed, every sentence. I mean, there's a whole scene in there that we can talk about offline that just grabbed me, and I'll share that with you in a little bit.
Mhm.
Um, but Poppy has a question about Jonathan Shapiro, because you thank him in the notes, and
Mhm.
we hardcore readers, and writers always read the acknowledgments. It's like one of the best
I do
parts.
too. I
Right?
do too.
Yeah.
Yes.
So she wants to know, like, some of the things that you talked to him about.
Oh gosh. That was that was the best conversation, and I'll tell you how that conversation came about.
Okay.
I was, with Hank Philippi Ryan.
Yeah, we love
Anybody
him.
knows she is like superstar
I know I
in.
get to see her next week. I can't wait.
Oh my gosh, I just saw her last night. She was
Yeah.
here in Atlanta, and we did an event together, and,
Yeah.
she it just blows my mind how awesome she is. But
Mhm.
I was on her show,
Mhm.
First Chapter Fun,
Mhm.
First Chapter, yeah,
Yeah,
First
first
Chapter.
chapter fun. Mhm.
And so she read my book, and afterwards she said, "What's your next book about?" Because this was after the first book, and
Mhm.
she said, "What's your next book about?" And I told her, and I said, "Yeah, I'm writing this book that takes place in
Mhm.
the Jim Crow South of Mississippi and deals with voting rights, for Blacks." And she says, "Hmm."
Hmm.
She says, my husband
Mhm.
was actually a lawyer who, worked in Mississippi during that time. You should really talk to him." And she made the introduction. That's how incredibly generous Hank is. And she made the introduction. And I tell you, I could have talked to him for days. He had a wealth of stories, and he, was actually a lawyer working at that time, and, trying to help Blacks in Mississippi as part of the Freedom Summer. And, so we talked about all sorts of things. He
Mhm.
shared stories with me about, the other lawyers he worked with,
Mhm.
um, some of the threats, those lawyers, because they were Black, some of the threats that those lawyers received. We talked about the actual office where, they worked, which made it into the book.
Yeah.
Um,
Awesome.
so, I mean, he was just a font of knowledge,
Mhm.
and I am forever, ever grateful, to Jonathan for that. He is a giant,
Yeah.
and because of his great work, people like me, get to benefit and get to vote. Um,
Right.
so yeah, it was awesome. It was
But
awesome. It was like talking to a legend. He
yeah,
is a legend.
he is a
Mm,
legend, and so is Hank. So it's
absolutely.
yeah, absolutely. So Wanda Morris, Cleveland native, right? You made Cleveland proud, and you're doing this in support of Cleveland Reads. Can
Yes.
you talk a little bit about why reading and literacy is so important to you?
Oh my gosh, absolutely. Um, I started reading when I was 4 years old. Um, my mother said that I had like this insatiable appetite for books. And whenever the family budget allowed, she would buy me books. She would take me to the library.
Mhm.
Um, and I think she always did that because she had grown up in the Jim Crow South. My parents are from Alabama. And
Okay.
so they had grown up knowing what it was like not to have the right to vote, knowing people who did not know how to read and
Mhm.
write. And she always believed that reading was, both my parents, actually, my mother and my father, always believed that reading and books was the first entry to you climbing the ladder, to wherever your potential could take you.
Mhm.
And, so they were big on reading. There were books in our house. Um, you probably aren't old enough to remember this, but there used to be these big books called the encyclopedias.
Yes. No, I'm old enough.
And so we had encyclopedias
Uh-huh.
in our house. I remember always asking my father, "Daddy, how do I spell the word, superior?"
Yeah.
And
Look
he
it up.
would be like, "Go look it up in the dictionary."
Oh,
And I
mhm.
was like, if I knew how to spell it, I would need the dictionary."
It's
But that was a priceless lesson, because what he was doing was he was teaching me how to learn, and he was teaching me how to read. Um,
yes,
and so my parents instilled that in me. I've instilled it in my children.
good.
I remember growing up in school where they had this program called Reading is Fundamental, and
Mhm.
You got to read books and you
Yep.
log them, and the more, books you
Yep.
read, the bigger the prize you
This is
got.
essentially Cleveland Reads right now. You read it, you log it, you get prizes. So it's just everything old is new again.
Exactly. There was also I don't know if you got this, but there was the Scholastic where you could order books.
And you totally
Oh,
forgot until they showed up on your desk.
oh my
Yeah.
gosh.
Yeah.
I used to look forward to that doggone
Mhm.
thing, and I labored over which books
I
because
did the same because my parents would say you have
yeah,
X amount
right.
of
You
dollars. And I'd
can't
be like,
buy them
going,
all.
yeah. So then I would tell my friends, like, if you order this one and I order this one, then we can
Right,
swap, right?
right. We could swap. Yeah.
Right.
Oh my gosh. And
Yeah.
getting the books when they came in. Oh,
Yes.
yeah. Reading really is your stepping stone to wherever your potential can
Yeah.
take you.
When I grew up, Valentine's Day was special in our house, and we would, sit down for dinner, and there was always a gift on our chair
Mhm,
from our parents,
mhm.
just my sister and I. And in third grade, I got a thesaurus. So talk about, oh yeah, talk about like, your dad telling you to go
You
look up
are
in the
my kind of
dictionary.
girl.
I got well, go find another word for it. Look it up, find another word for it.
I love
So
it. You are my kind of girl. A thesaurus
absolutely,
for a gift. I love it. I love it.
absolutely.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
was that kid too. I would ask for books for Christmas. Yeah.
I even like the few times I got sick as a kid, they would take you to the doctor, then you'd have to go
Mhm.
and pick up the prescription. And my mom would be like, go pick out a book.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah.
Absolutely.
I remember
Absolutely.
that.
Can I have
I
two?
remember that. I had to have surgery as a little
Oh
kid,
no.
and, I, remember my mom just coming to the hospital with all these books, and, you know, she brought a couple puzzles. I never even touched them. I was reading the books. Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah.
That's awesome. Is there anything that I'm talking again to Wanda Morris, like rock star of Cleveland, anything that you want our viewers or listeners to know that I haven't asked you?
Ah, gosh, your questions have been so insightful and thorough, and I
Uh-oh.
think you've kind of much talked about everything. I miss home. People down here tell me I'm crazy because I'm like, I think I miss the snow. I think I've been gone long enough from Cleveland that I miss
You're
the snow.
welcome anytime. My house is always open. I'll call you the next time it snows. Um, so let's wrap up, right, with some of the final 5 questions for Wanda Morris. What do you miss most besides the snow about living in Cleveland?
Um, Probably, you know what? It probably isn't even there anymore, but there was a restaurant that I used to go to, and the name of it escapes me now.
Okay.
It was down near, the square
Mhm.
downtown. Oh my gosh. And I'm sure it's not there anymore because I used to go there when I was in law school, and they had the best burgers. It was like a pub kind of place, and I cannot remember it for the life of
Okay.
me. But I always thought Cleveland has some of the best restaurants,
It
some of
does.
the best neighborhood restaurants.
And
Yeah.
like the best, I think, art scene. I mean, with the orchestra and the
Yeah.
Cleveland Museum of Art
Oh my
and
gosh, yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, because, I went to Case, and it was right over there by
You
the
should
s
see you should see what that place looks like now, what Midtown and how cool it is now
Well,
to go
the
visit.
last time I was home, I almost didn't recognize it. First
Yeah.
of all, the fact that Cleveland Clinic has come so far up
Yes.
Euclid, I was like,
Yes. It's
"What
like a
in
runaway train.
it's like a whole 'nother city." And, and then I went back over by the campus and
Yeah.
that whole area, and I you're right, I didn't recognize it. I didn't
Yeah.
recognize it.
What book do you think everybody should read and why?
Um,
Oh, sorry, I
not
put it
to
on
not
top.
to sound like I'm proselytizing, but the Bible.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Very
I
good.
think that if people read, the instruction there might be a
We
little kind
might move from
yeah,
where we are to where we know we ought
exactly,
to be, right?
exactly. My mom used to say, even the devil can quote scripture.
Ooh,
So it's more than just reading it, but it's actually abiding by
uh,
what the Bible tells
yeah,
us.
it's one thing to read, it's another thing to apply.
Right,
Blessing.
exactly.
Yeah. Ray, who happens to be my mom, says, thank you. What a great way to spend an evening. So,
Oh, thank you, Ray.
what is the best thing about being a writer?
Um, I think it sounds kind of weird, but I just like creating characters and people
Mhm,
that feel real to me. Like
mhm.
I would love to go and spend an hour having lunch with Elise Littlejohn from All Her Little Secrets, or
Exactly.
I would love to talk to Violet Richards and give her a big old hug, and
I,
I think that's the coolest thing, that I get to create these characters that impart something to the readers.
which sister in this latest book, Marigold or Violet, would you take a road trip with?
Probably Violet. She seems like she'd be a lot of fun on a road trip, although
Well, yeah.
I don't think that I'm, like, cool enough to
Oh, heck
hang with
yeah, you are.
Violet.
Heck yeah. What writer do you fangirl over? Since mine has been relatively well contained, at least I hope so.
Um, gosh, I have several.
Okay.
Um, like, I had a bucket list moment last night because I got to finally meet Hank Philippi Ryan,
Hmm.
last night
In
in
person, in real life.
person, right, in real life. And she is just as gorgeous and generous in real life as she is in, all the stuff she does for writers.
Yes.
Um, you know what? I love Attica Locke. I
Hmm.
like, um, and these are people that I haven't met, although I once met Walter Mosley, but I think he's really cool. I don't think I'm cool enough to hang out with Walter Mosley,
Yeah, you
but
are.
he's so freaking
I'll write you a note, a cool note.
yeah, right? He is so freaking smart,
Yeah.
and, his writing is just ridiculously, cool. And then I just have some writer friends that, have done so much for this industry, and particularly marginalized writers like Kelly Garrett and,
Hmm.
Alex Segura, people like
Yes.
that
Yes.
who are kind and generous, and they risk their their writing reputations to make sure that we all have a seat at the table. So
I think
yeah.
that's the thing that strikes me. I've gone to BoucherCon twice, and the
Mhm.
camaraderie that exists
Ah,
between you all. You're all trying to
yes.
help one another.
Mhm.
It's really cool to see. It's not cutthroat. It's
Yeah.
not nasty. It's like being at a band camp reunion, for lack of a
I like that.
better
I like that
expression.
analogy.
Yeah,
I like that analogy. That's true.
yeah. So, I just want to say thank you to all of you who are watching and listening to Writers Unplugged. I'm Jen Jumba with the Cleveland Public Library. Our amazing independent bookstore, Max Backs Books on Coventry, has copies of Wanda's All Her Little Secrets and Anywhere You Run. I want to say thank you to the Cleveland Public Library tech team who works so hard behind the scenes to make sure we look good and sound good. And then a huge thanks to you, Wanda Morris, for taking time to
Oh,
chat with us this evening. I know I'm better for having knowing you, reading you, and cannot wait to see what you write next. And I will be first in line to pre-order, because I should let everybody know that pre-order is a very important thing to writers.
yes.
Not just buying
Very.
on pub day, but you pre-order it. It means the world. So
It means the world because it tells your publisher that people want to read your books and there's an audience for your book.
heck yeah.
And I do a quick shout out to my nephew, Jermon
Absolutely.
Joffrey. He works for the Cleveland Public Library. So thanks, Jermon, and thank you to Jen. Thank you for this,
Absolutely.
for inviting me and for such insightful questions and
Oh, you're
giving me
quite
this
welcome.
opportunity to share. Thank you
Yeah,
so
if you just want to hang tight, for a couple minutes. But thank you to everybody. This has been Writers Unplugged with Wanda Morris. Have a good night.